The truth was not hidden because it was false, but because it reveals itself too quickly to those who still need time. This book was hidden because it works too fast. A manuscript removed from circulation for a dangerous reason. Chapter 1. The mechanism that collapses time. There is a reason why most teachings speak about patience, gradual progress, and trusting the process. It is not because reality needs time. It is because the human system does. What this book reveals is not a technique. It is not a ritual. It is not positive thinking. It is a mechanism, and mechanisms do not negotiate. When activated, this mechanism does not ask if you are ready. It does not test your emotional maturity. It does not check your beliefs. It simply executes, and this is precisely why it was hidden. The lie about time. Time is not what creates results. Time is what protects identity from shock. Most people believe that manifestation takes long because reality is slow. That is false. Reality responds instantly to coherence. What delays outcomes is the misalignment between who you are and what you are calling. This book does not teach how to wait better. It explains how results appear when delay is removed. And here is the danger. When delay disappears, you meet consequences immediately. Why fast results break people? There is a phenomenon rarely discussed in public teachings. When reality changes faster than the nervous system can adapt, the mind experiences threat, not pleasure. Sudden abundance creates fear. Sudden love creates distrust. Sudden success creates self-rejection. This is why many people sabotage their biggest breakthroughs right after they happen. They didn't fail to manifest, they failed to sustain the speed. This mechanism does not create slowly so you feel safe. It creates fast so you reveal who you actually are. The compression effect. When this mechanism activates, three things collapse into one moment: desire, identity, outcome. In traditional systems, these are spaced out by time. Here, they collide. And collision always creates heat. That heat is interpreted by the mind as danger, which explains why people say things like, "This feels unreal. I don't deserve this. Something bad is going to happen." Those are not negative thoughts. They are protective responses. Why this was removed. From mass teaching, civilizations do not collapse because people are slow. They collapse when change is too fast to integrate. Fast manifestation destabilizes hierarchies, belief systems, family roles, power structures. A society where outcomes respond instantly to internal alignment is impossible to control. So systems were built to stretch time artificially. Rituals, rules, merit narratives, moral delays, not to make you better, but to make you predictable. The first truth: you must accept this mechanism does not make life easier. It makes life honest. It reveals misalignment immediately, which is why many who access it wish they hadn't. Once speed is unlocked, there is no hiding behind effort, excuses, or divine timing. Reality starts answering exactly as you are, not as you hope to be. Why this chapter matters. If you continue reading this book seeking shortcuts, stop. This is not about getting more. It is about removing the delay between who you are and what you experience. That removal is irreversible. And from this point forward, you are no longer protected by slowness. You are only protected by coherence. Chapter 2. Why most people fail after it works. The psychological collapse caused by accelerated manifestation. What no one tells you is that manifestation rarely destroys people before it works. It destroys them after. Most collapses do not happen in moments of lack. They happen in moments of arrival. This chapter exists because countless individuals reached the outcome they asked for, and then quietly imploded. Not because the result was wrong, but because their internal structure was not built to receive it at that speed. Success is a shock, not a reward. The human mind is conditioned to associate success with relief. But accelerated manifestation does not bring relief. It brings exposure. When reality changes too quickly, the nervous system interprets it as instability, not victory. Sudden financial expansion triggers fear of loss. Sudden love triggers fear of abandonment. Sudden recognition triggers fear of judgment. The body does not ask if the outcome is positive. It only asks one question: can I survive this change? And most people's systems answer no. The identity lag. Phenomenon manifestation that works fast creates a phenomenon almost never addressed. Identity lag. Reality updates first. Identity updates later. You wake up in a life that no longer matches your internal self-image. Your bank account changes before your self-worth does. Your relationship changes before your attachment patterns do. Your status changes before your nervous system recalibrates. This gap creates intense psychological friction. And friction, when unresolved, becomes self-sabotage. Why the mind panics when dreams arrive. The mind evolved to preserve continuity, not happiness. Anything that threatens the familiar, even positively, is flagged as danger. That is why people say things like, "I don't feel like myself anymore. This happened too fast. I wish things would slow down." They are not ungrateful. They are dysregulated. Manifestation did not fail. Integration did. The collapse pattern. Nobody warns you about when accelerated manifestation occurs. Most people unconsciously follow this pattern. Initial disbelief, hypervigilance, emotional numbness, self-sabotaging behavior return to the previous identity. Not because they want to lose what they gained, but because returning to the familiar feels safer than adapting to the unknown. The subconscious always chooses familiarity over expansion, even if familiarity is painful. Why some people get depressed after winning? There is a silent epidemic of post-success depression. People reach what they prayed for and feel emptier than before. This happens because desire gave them direction, but arrival removes it. When manifestation happens too fast, the mind has no time to rebuild meaning. The result is existential shock. You are no longer chasing, but you don't yet know how to be. The nervous system bottleneck. Most teachings focus on belief. Almost none focus on capacity. Manifestation speed is limited by the nervous system's ability to process change. If the body cannot regulate safety at a higher level of reality, it will unconsciously dismantle it. This is not spiritual punishment. It is biological self-protection. Your system will not allow you to live in a reality it cannot stabilize. Why people call this bad luck? From the outside, it looks like misfortune. From the inside, it is collapse. Opportunities disappear, relationships fall apart, money leaks out. People say it just didn't last. The truth is harsher. They could create it, but they could not hold it. The speed threshold. There is a threshold beyond which manifestation becomes dangerous without preparation. Not morally dangerous, psychologically dangerous. When outcomes arrive faster than emotional integration, the mind fractures. This is why ancient systems hid acceleration mechanisms behind initiations, silence, and long preparation. Not to be mystical, but to be humane. Why most teachers never mention this? Because teaching slow manifestation feels safer. Because collapse stories are inconvenient. Because it is easier to sell hope than responsibility. But this book does not exist to make you hopeful. It exists to make you ready. The hard truth of this chapter: manifestation is not limited by the universe. It is limited by your ability to remain regulated inside change. If your nervous system cannot feel safe in expansion, it will sabotage it flawlessly. every time. Why you needed to read this before continuing. If you believe failure only happens when manifestation does not work, this book will confuse you. If you believe success automatically brings peace, this book will disturb you, because the real work begins after it works, and the next chapter will expose the exact internal gap that causes most people to fall back into their old reality, even after touching something greater. Once you see it, you will never unsee it. Chapter 3. The identity gap that destroys results, when reality changes faster than who you are. There is a silent force more destructive than doubt, fear, or lack of discipline. It is the identity gap. This gap appears when reality upgrades faster than the internal self-concept that must inhabit it. Most people believe results disappear because they stop believing, stop trying, or stop deserving. That is not true. Results disappear because the new reality has no one stable enough to live inside it. Identity is not what you think it is. Identity is not your personality. It is not your goals. It is not even your beliefs. Identity is your baseline sense of normal. It is what your nervous system recognizes as, "This is my life." Anything above that baseline feels temporary. Anything below it feels expected. Manifestation does not fail when reality shifts. It fails when identity refuses to follow. Why reality can outgrow you. When manifestation accelerates, outcomes respond to alignment, not maturity. Money appears before you stop feeling poor. Love arrives before you stop expecting abandonment. Visibility comes before you stop hiding internally. Reality moves, identity freezes. This is where destruction begins. Not dramatic destruction, subtle erosion, missed calls, unreturned messages, impulsive decisions, strange resistance, all designed to pull life back to the level identity can tolerate, the comfort ceiling. Every person lives under an invisible ceiling. Not a ceiling of possibility, a ceiling of self-permission. You can only sustain what feels normal. Anything that feels too much will be unconsciously reduced. This is why people say, "I don't know why I did that. It just slipped away. I messed it up." They didn't mess it up. They returned to coherence with who they believe they are. The internal dialogue that destroys everything. The identity gap speaks quietly. It sounds like logic. This won't last. People like me don't keep this. This is not really mine. These are not thoughts. They are identity signals, and identity always overrides desire. You can want abundance consciously and reject it subconsciously at the same time. The subconscious always wins. Why motivation can't fix. This motivation operates at the level of behavior. The identity gap operates at the level of existence. You cannot hustle your way into a new self-image. You cannot affirm your way past a nervous system that does not recognize safety at a higher level. This is why people burn out trying to maintain success. They are holding a life that does not feel like home. The disorientation phase. When identity lags behind reality, people experience disorientation. They feel disconnected from themselves, their environment, and even their achievements. They say things like, "I don't recognize myself anymore. I feel like I'm pretending. This doesn't feel real." This is not imposter syndrome. It is identity dislocation. The old self no longer fits. The new self has not yet formed. This limbo is where most people lose everything. Why regression feels like relief. When people fall back into old patterns, they often feel calmer, less anxious, more grounded. They mistake this for peace. It is not peace. It is familiarity. Regression feels safe because identity recognizes it. This is why people sabotage without panic. They are not self-destructive. They are self-consistent. The hidden cost of fast manifestation speed removes the gradual identity updates that normally occur through struggle. Struggle slowly reshapes self-concept. Acceleration skips that phase. So the result arrives, but the internal architecture is missing. It is like moving into a mansion with the wiring of a small apartment. Everything overloads. Why this gap was never publicly taught. Teaching people how to change identity is far more destabilizing than teaching techniques. Identity transformation dismantles family roles, belief systems, and social contracts. A person who updates identity quickly becomes unpredictable, uncontrollable. This is why systems focused on results, not self-definition. Results can be regulated, identity cannot. The most dangerous moment. The most dangerous moment is not failure. It is the moment you realize, this worked, but I don't feel like the person who should have this. At that moment, one of two things happens. Either identity expands to meet reality, or reality collapses to protect identity. There is no third option. Why you must face this now. If you ignore the identity gap, accelerated manifestation will keep punishing you with temporary miracles. Enough to make you believe, never enough to stay. This book does not teach how to get more. It teaches how to become someone who does not need to lose what arrives. The silent decision. This chapter forces. You must choose. Do you want fast results? Or do you want to become someone who can live where fast results naturally occur? Because without identity alignment, speed is not a gift. It is a weapon turned inward. Chapter 4. The silent law of nervous system saturation. Why the body freezes when life moves too fast. There is a law older than belief, discipline, or desire. It does not respond to motivation. It does not negotiate with willpower. It does not care what you want. It is the law of nervous system saturation. Every human nervous system has a capacity for change. When that capacity is exceeded, the body intervenes, not as punishment, as protection. This chapter explains why life can move forward, and the body says no. The body is not designed for sudden upgrades. The nervous system evolved to maintain survival, not expansion. It tracks patterns, predicts outcomes, and stabilizes internal safety. When external reality changes faster than internal regulation can adapt, the nervous system activates a brake. This brake is not mental, it is physiological. Heart rate shifts, breathing alters, muscle tone changes, cognition narrows. The body does not ask whether the change is good, it only asks whether the change is known. Saturation is not overwhelm, it is loss of safety. People confuse saturation with stress. They are not the same. Stress can be motivating. Saturation cannot. Saturation occurs when the nervous system receives more novelty, intensity, or responsibility than it can integrate. At that point, the system chooses one of three responses: freeze, collapse, self-sabotage. All of them serve the same function, slowing reality down. Why positive change triggers shutdown? The nervous system does not categorize events as positive or negative. It categorizes them as predictable or unpredictable. Sudden success is unpredictable. Sudden love is unpredictable. Sudden visibility is unpredictable. Predictability equals safety. Unpredictability equals threat. This is why people experience anxiety, fatigue, dissociation, or numbness right after breakthroughs. The body is not celebrating, it is stabilizing. The freeze response, explained freeze, is often misunderstood as laziness or avoidance. In reality, freeze is the nervous system's last line of defense. When fight or flight would create more instability, the system immobilizes. Decision-making slows, motivation disappears, energy drops. This is not resistance, it is containment. The body is saying, this is happening too fast. Why willpower makes it worse. Trying to push through saturation with discipline intensifies the threat signal. The nervous system interprets pressure as danger, so the brake tightens. More fatigue, more confusion, more emotional volatility. This is why people say, I know what to do, but I can't do it. I feel stuck for no reason. There is a reason. The body is protecting its limits, the invisible capacity limit. Each person has a nervous system capacity shaped by early environment, trauma, stability history, exposure to responsibility, emotional regulation skills. This capacity determines how much life expansion can occur without shutdown. Manifestation techniques bypass belief, but they do not bypass capacity. When results exceed capacity, saturation is inevitable. Why some people thrive and others collapse. Two people can receive the same opportunity. One flourishes, the other collapses. The difference is not mindset, it is regulation bandwidth. The person who thrives has a nervous system accustomed to holding complexity, responsibility, and uncertainty. The person who collapses does not. This is not a moral failure. It is a biological reality. The hidden reason. Slow growth was always recommended. Traditions that emphasized gradual progress were not naive. They understood something modern teachings ignore. The nervous system updates slowly. Slow growth allows safety recalibration. Fast growth demands it instantly. Without preparation, the body will reject expansion, regardless of belief. Why this law was never popularized. Teaching nervous system limits threatens the fantasy of unlimited manifestation. It introduces responsibility. It forces preparation. It removes shortcuts, but ignoring it creates collapse cycles. This book chooses truth over comfort. The body always wins. You can override your mind temporarily. You cannot override your nervous system indefinitely. Eventually, it will force a correction, burnout, illness, withdrawal, loss of interest, all designed to restore safety. The silent agreement you didn't know. You made your body agreed to protect you, not to make you extraordinary. Extraordinary outcomes require extraordinary regulation. Without it, expansion feels like danger, and danger must be neutralized. Why this chapter changes everything. If you have ever wondered why things fall apart right when they start working, this chapter answers it. You were not cursed. You were not blocked. You were saturated. The next chapter will reveal why societies deliberately slowed these mechanisms down, not out of ignorance, but fear. Fear of what happens when too many people expand faster than their nervous systems can adapt. Once you see that, the entire structure of control becomes visible, and invisibility is lost forever. Chapter 5. The reason religions slowed this down. Social control, stability, and the fear of chaos. Acceleration has never been humanity's greatest fear. Unregulated acceleration has. Long before manifestation had a name, civilizations understood something dangerous. When inner alignment produces outer results too quickly, societies destabilize, not spiritually, structurally. This chapter does not attack religion. It explains why religion intervened. Speed was never the problem. Unpredictability was. Early spiritual systems observed a pattern. Individuals who accessed rapid cause and effect alignment became difficult to govern. They did not wait. They did not defer. They did not obey narratives built on delay. They moved according to inner authority, and inner authority spreads faster than doctrine. For organized societies, this was not enlightenment, it was chaos. Why delays became sacred. Religions did not remove power, they slowed it down. Time was introduced as a buffer between desire and outcome. Prayer replaced immediacy. Ritual replaced direct alignment. Obedience replaced coherence, not because alignment was false, but because alignment without delay collapses hierarchy. When results respond instantly to internal state, external authority loses leverage. The stability contract. Every organized belief system operates under an unspoken contract. Individuals surrender speed. Institutions provide structure. This trade stabilized civilizations. Delayed reward encouraged patience. Deferred salvation encouraged obedience. Moral sequencing encouraged predictability. Fast manifestation breaks this contract. It creates individuals who no longer need permission. Why miracles were rare on purpose. Miracles were never meant to be accessible. They were exceptional, not instructional. If everyone could replicate them, systems would lose relevance. So miracles became stories, not mechanisms. Revered, worshipped, but never explained. Speed was mythologized, not taught. The fear of mass acceleration. A society where outcomes respond immediately to inner alignment cannot be centralized. People stop waiting. They stop negotiating. They stop accepting delay as virtue. This is why religions emphasized long preparation, moral filtration, hierarchical mediation, punishment narratives, deferred reward systems, not because people were sinful, but because speed removes control. Control does not require lies, only timing. The most effective control systems do not deny truth, they postpone it. By stretching time between cause and effect, systems remain intact. You can tolerate injustice longer if reward is promised later. You can endure suffering if outcome is distant. Acceleration collapses tolerance, and intolerance destabilizes order. Why inner authority is dangerous to systems. Inner authority produces unpredictable behavior. People guided internally do not move in groups easily. They do not follow mass rhythms. They do not synchronize with institutional pacing. This threatens economic planning, social stratification, power continuity, cultural inertia. Religion slowed manifestation not to oppress, but to preserve structure. The moralization of speed became associated with arrogance, temptation, or corruption. Slowness became virtue. Waiting became holiness. Suffering became purification. This moral framing discouraged acceleration without denying its existence. Those who moved too fast were labeled dangerous or heretical. Why this was effective? Most people accepted delay as divine will, not because it was true, but because it reduced anxiety. Delay creates meaning. Acceleration creates responsibility. Responsibility frightens more than submission. The hidden cost of stability. Stability preserved societies, but it also preserved stagnation. Innovation slowed. Individual alignment was suppressed. Inner coherence was outsourced to authority. People learned to wait instead of calibrate. Why this knowledge resurfaced? Now modern systems are already unstable. Control is fragmented. Authority is decentralized. Belief is optional. Speed is no longer containable. This is why acceleration teachings re-emerge cyclically, always during transitions, not to save systems, but to serve individuals. Why this chapter is uncomfortable? Because it removes the illusion of benevolent delay. It reveals that slowness was not always wisdom. Sometimes it was strategy, and strategies expire. The core. Truth of this chapter: religion slowed manifestation because fast alignment creates autonomous individuals. Autonomous individuals destabilize systems. This was not evil, it was survival. But survival of systems often requires the suppression of speed. What this means for you: If you feel guilt for wanting fast results, understand where that guilt was installed. If you associate speed with danger, understand why. That fear was inherited, not innate. Why you are reading this now? Because the old stabilizers are failing. Because delay no longer protects, it frustrates. Because acceleration is returning. Not as rebellion, but as necessity. The next chapter will expose what happens externally when individuals accelerate faster than collective systems can tolerate, and why fast results often attract invisible resistance. Once you understand that layer, isolation will stop feeling personal, and pressure will start making sense. Chapter 6. Fast results create invisible enemies, external reactions, sabotage, and energetic isolation. No one warns you about what happens around you when things start working too fast. Not spiritually, socially. Fast results do not move silently through the world. They disturb invisible structures, and disturbance always triggers response. This chapter explains why accelerated manifestation rarely collapses only from the inside, and why resistance often appears disguised as coincidence, concern, or distance. Not all resistance is internal. Modern teachings overemphasize inner blocks. But when results accelerate, external pressure increases proportionally. People around you react before they understand, not consciously, instinctively. Your expansion destabilizes their internal equilibrium, and equilibrium always seeks restoration. Why success triggers discomfort in others? Human nervous systems synchronize. When someone close to you changes speed, trajectory, or identity abruptly, others experience it as threat, even if they benefit from you. Your fast growth reflects their stagnation. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your movement highlights their hesitation. This does not make them malicious. It makes them reactive. The subtle forms of sabotage. Invisible enemies rarely attack directly. They appear as a doubt disguised as concern, delay disguised as advice, distraction disguised as opportunity, withdrawal disguised as neutrality. People do not say, "Stop growing." They say, "Are you sure? Maybe slow down. Don't change so much. You're different lately." Difference is the trigger. Why isolation begins. Quietly. As results accelerate, conversations shift, topics narrow, energy changes, silence increases. You feel less understood, not because you became arrogant, but because you no longer resonate at the same speed. This creates energetic isolation, not loneliness, misalignment. Your nervous system adapts upward. Others feel destabilized. Distance becomes regulation. The unspoken social contract. You broke. Most relationships are built on implicit symmetry, similar pace, shared limitation, mutual reassurance. Fast manifestation breaks symmetry. You did not promise to stay small, but expectations existed anyway. Breaking them creates friction, and friction seeks resolution. Why even supporters become unpredictable. Even those who love you may unconsciously resist your speed. They fear losing access, they fear displacement, they fear irrelevance. Their reactions oscillate, encouragement one day, withdrawal the next. This inconsistency is not betrayal. It is regulation failure. The energetic aspect. No one names beyond psychology. There is an energetic phenomenon. Fast results increase coherence density. Your presence becomes more defined, more directional, less diffuse. Diffuse systems feel comfortable to others. Defined systems do not. Your clarity interrupts emotional noise. That interruption is felt as pressure. Why people project negativity onto you. When someone cannot regulate what your expansion activates in them, they externalize it. You become the symbol, arrogant, lucky, reckless, selfish. Labels appear where understanding fails. Projection restores their internal balance. At your expense. Why this feels personal, but isn't. It feels like rejection. It feels like jealousy. It feels like abandonment. But most of the time it is incompatibility of regulation. People are not rejecting you. They are protecting themselves from dysregulation. The loneliness phase. Nearly everyone who accelerates passes through isolation, not punishment, calibration. Old bonds loosen before new ones form. If you misinterpret this phase, you will retreat. If you endure it consciously, coherence stabilizes, helps attract aligned structures. Why this was known in ancient systems. Initiations often required solitude, silence, separation, withdrawal, not as mysticism, as protection. Fast expansion without social insulation invites collapse. Isolation reduces interference. The real enemy is not people. The real enemy is unfiltered exposure during acceleration. When everyone has access to you, everyone influences you. Influence slows coherence. Coherence demands boundaries. Why sabotage often looks like bad timing. Plans fall apart. Support disappears. Momentum stalls. It looks like bad luck, but often it is environmental correction. Systems resisting your speed introduce friction, enough to slow you down. The choice. This chapter forces you must decide, will you seek comfort through familiarity or stability through coherence? Familiarity restores belonging. Coherence sustains expansion. You cannot have both at the same time. The hardest truth. Here, fast results require energetic sovereignty, less explanation, less negotiation, less validation, more internal alignment. If you require approval, acceleration will punish you, not because approval is wrong, but because it fragments coherence. Why this chapter exists. So you stop interpreting resistance as failure. So you stop personalizing distance. So you stop explaining yourself to systems that cannot move at your speed. Invisible enemies are not villains. They are indicators. Indicators that you are moving faster than your environment can integrate. What comes next? The next chapter reveals the only safe way to use accelerated manifestation, not to avoid resistance, but to remain intact inside it. It will dismantle the fantasy of speed without responsibility and replace it with something far more powerful. Stability without delay. Once you understand that, acceleration stops being dangerous and starts becoming inevitable. Chapter 7. The only safe way to use this. The fine adjustment almost no one teaches. After everything revealed so far, one question becomes unavoidable. If accelerated manifestation is real and dangerous, is there a way to use it without collapsing? Yes. But it is not the way most people want. This chapter exists because speed alone is not the problem. Uncalibrated speed is. Why most teachings stop too early. Most systems teach how to initiate acceleration. Very few teach how to stabilize it. They show you how to open the door, but not how to reinforce the structure once you step through. The result is predictable. Fast outcomes, followed by confusion, followed by loss. The missing element is not belief. It is fine adjustment, the myth of letting go completely. Many teachings suggest surrender as the solution. Let go and trust. Release control. Stop thinking. This advice is incomplete. Letting go without calibration creates instability. Acceleration requires precision, not passivity. You do not abandon the wheel while the vehicle is moving faster. You adjust it. The principle of incremental coherence. The only safe way to use acceleration is to increase coherence at the same rate as results, not gradually, not eventually, simultaneously. Coherence means alignment across 4 layers: thought, emotion, nervous system, behavior. If one layer lags, instability forms. Acceleration exposes weak links immediately. Why awareness alone is not enough. Many people become aware of their patterns. Awareness does not rewire capacity. Understanding your trauma does not automatically expand your nervous system. Insight without regulation increases frustration. The fine adjustment happens at the level of felt safety, not understanding. The calibration rule. Here is the rule almost no one teaches. Never increase output faster than your system's ability to remain regulated inside it. This means fewer declarations, less explanation, reduced stimulation, intentional pacing, not to slow results, but to stabilize them. The counterintuitive adjustment. The faster things start working, the quieter you must become. Not externally, internally. Less mental rehearsal, less future projection, less identity narration. Acceleration amplifies noise. Silence stabilizes signal. Why rituals were never about magic. Ancient rituals were regulation tools. Repetition stabilized the nervous system. Structure created safety. Predictability allowed integration. Modern acceleration teachings removed ritual and removed safety with it. Fine adjustment reintroduces structure without delay. The role of micro-containment is not suppression. It is capacity management. Micro-containment means choosing fewer conversations, limiting exposure, reducing unnecessary decision-making, protecting internal rhythm. This is not isolation. It is buffering. Buffers prevent saturation. Why you must stop seeking validation. Validation fragments coherence. Every external confirmation creates dependency. Acceleration requires internal closure. If you need others to agree with your reality, your system will oscillate. Oscillation destabilizes speed, the nervous system. First rule, before asking, "Is this aligned?" ask, "Can my body stay regulated while this expands?" If the answer is no, you adjust, not the goal, the interface. This is how results stay. The hidden role of identity anchors. You must anchor identity before outcomes solidify. Anchors are not affirmations. They are repeated internal states. Calm during expansion, presence during success, neutrality during praise. This rewires normal. Normal is what stays. Why this feels less exciting. Fine adjustment is subtle. It lacks drama. It lacks spectacle. It lacks urgency. But it is the difference between temporary miracles and stable reality. The non-negotiable discipline. This path requires one discipline. Do not chase the next result until your system feels normal where you are. Not bored, not euphoric, normal. Normal means integrated. Why this was rarely taught. Publicly fine adjustment cannot be mass-marketed. It requires self-responsibility. It removes fantasy. It forces honesty. People want speed without accountability. This chapter removes that illusion. The quiet power of regulation. When regulation matches acceleration, something changes. Results stop feeling fragile. Opposition loses power. Identity stabilizes. Life no longer swings. It holds. The moment you know you're using it safely, you will know you are calibrated when expansion feels calm, success feels ordinary, silence feels sufficient. You stop explaining. That is the signal, not excitement, stability, the truth that ends. This chapter. There is no safe way to use acceleration without becoming someone who can live inside it. This chapter did not teach you how to get more. It taught you how to remain intact when more arrives. The next chapter will explain why this book finds people at very specific moments and why timing, in this case, is not coincidence. Once you see that pattern, randomness disappears forever, and so does doubt. Chapter 8. Why this book finds you at a specific moment. Real synchronicity, not motivational coincidence. This book does not arrive randomly. That statement is not poetic. It is structural. Synchronicity is not the universe sending encouragement. It is a convergence of readiness, pressure, and capacity. When those three align, information surfaces, not before, not after. Exactly then. Synchronicity is not a sign. It is a match. Most people misunderstand synchronicity as reassurance. A feather, a number, a feeling. Those are symbols. Real synchronicity is not symbolic. It is functional. You encounter specific information because your internal state can now execute it. Not perfectly, but sufficiently. Information does not circulate freely. It activates selectively. Why you couldn't have found this earlier. If you had encountered this book before, it would have sounded abstract, interesting, intellectual, but distant. You would have nodded and moved on. Now, it lands differently because something in your life is already moving too fast. Pressure is present. Expansion is occurring. Instability is visible. This book appears when acceleration has already begun, not to initiate it, to stabilize it. The law of informational timing. Information obeys timing just like outcomes do. Early exposure overwhelms. Late exposure becomes useless. There is a narrow window where knowledge can be applied without collapse. This book exists inside that window, not for everyone, for those whose lives are already outpacing their internal structures. Why motivation feels wrong here. Motivational content pushes. This book does not push. It interrupts. If this book feels unsettling rather than inspiring, that is intentional. Motivation amplifies desire. This book amplifies responsibility. You are not being encouraged. You are being addressed. The selection mechanism. No one talks about. People often say, "This resonated with me." Resonance is not emotional agreement. It is structural compatibility. This material resonates because your system recognizes it as necessary, not comforting, necessary. That recognition happens below thought. Why others won't understand, why this matters to you. You may try to explain this book to others. They will not feel it. They may find it excessive, overcomplicated, unnecessary. That is because their systems are not under the same pressure. Information that arrives outside timing feels irrelevant. Information that arrives inside timing feels inevitable. The invisible threshold you crossed before this moment. Acceleration was hypothetical. Now it is active. You have crossed a threshold where speed is no longer optional. Opportunities appear faster. Consequences arrive sooner. Feedback tightens. This book appears after that threshold, not to warn you, to inform you. Synchronicity is a response, not an invitation. The universe does not invite you forward. It responds to your movement. This book did not call you. You called it through pressure, expansion, and instability. Synchronicity answers momentum. Why this feels personal? Because it is. This book does not apply broadly. It applies specifically to those whose internal regulation has become the bottleneck, to those who can no longer slow life down without damage, to those who sense that going backward is no longer safe. That specificity creates intimacy, not inspiration. Recognition. The moment knowledge becomes inevitable. There is a point where ignorance becomes more dangerous than knowing. You have reached it. Continuing without understanding would create collapse. This book appears as a stabilizer, not a catalyst. Why this is not spiritual romanticism. Nothing here promises destiny. Nothing here guarantees outcomes. This is not a message of being chosen. It is a message of being timed. Timing is neutral. It is not flattering. It is precise. The cost of ignoring this moment. If you dismiss this book as coincidence, acceleration will continue without structure. The consequences will not pause. Pressure will increase. Resistance will intensify. Isolation will deepen. Information does not repeat endlessly. It circulates when usable. Why you are still reading? You are not curious. You are calibrating. Something in you recognizes that continuing as before is unsustainable. This book offers language for what you are already experiencing. That is synchronicity, not magic. The most important distinction. Motivation asks, what do you want? Synchronicity asks, what can you now handle? This book appears because your system can now handle this level of responsibility. Not because you asked, because you arrived. The quiet truth of this chapter. This book finds people who are already changing, not those who want to. Wanting creates delay. Movement creates alignment. Alignment summons information. What comes next? The next chapter will force a decision, not a dramatic one, a quiet one, whether to continue forward knowing what you now know, or stop here before responsibility becomes unavoidable, because the next chapter removes plausible deniability. Once read, pretending ignorance is no longer possible, and that changes everything. Chapter 9. If you ignore this chapter, stop here, the point of no return. This chapter is not informative, it is decisive. Nothing new will be taught here, nothing inspirational will be offered, no techniques will be revealed. This chapter exists to mark a boundary. If you continue reading without integrating what follows, the damage will not be theoretical, it will be lived. Why this chapter is different. Up to this point, the book has explained mechanisms, speed, identity lag, nervous system saturation, social resistance, fine adjustment, timing. This chapter removes distance. It is no longer about how things work. It is about what you are now responsible for. Knowledge changes the contract. Before this chapter, collapse could be blamed on ignorance. After this chapter, it cannot. Once you understand the dynamics of accelerated manifestation, you are no longer innocent, not morally, structurally. Reality responds differently to informed systems. Ignorance absorbs shock. Awareness amplifies consequence. The illusion of just knowing. Many people believe knowledge is passive. It is not. Knowledge alters perception. Perception alters behavior. Behavior alters reality. Even if you try to ignore what you now understand, your system has already updated. You cannot unread alignment. You cannot unsee structure. Why ignoring this creates damage? When people gain insight without responsibility, instability follows. They move faster without regulation. They attempt control without coherence. They pursue outcomes without capacity. This produces sharper collapses than ignorance ever did. Partial understanding is more dangerous than none. The threshold. You are standing on this chapter exists at a threshold. On one side, life governed by delay, confusion, and unconscious correction. On the other, life governed by immediacy, responsibility, and internal regulation. There is no middle ground. Trying to oscillate between them creates fracture, the silent agreement you must make. If you continue, you implicitly agree to three things. You will no longer blame timing. You will no longer chase speed without regulation. You will no longer outsource coherence. These are not affirmations. They are structural commitments. Without them, acceleration becomes destructive. Why this is the point of no return. Before this moment, retreat was possible. After this moment, retreat feels dishonest. You can still choose stagnation, but you will experience it consciously. That awareness changes everything. Comfort disappears. Excuses lose power. The cost of continuing without integrity. If you continue seeking fast results while ignoring regulation, identity alignment, and containment, one of three outcomes will occur: burnout, loss, fragmentation, not because the universe punishes, because systems self-correct. Correction without cooperation is violent. Why this chapter warns, instead of guides. Guidance without consent creates resistance. This chapter does not guide. It asks you to decide. Are you willing to become someone who can hold what arrives? Or do you want outcomes without responsibility? Only one path is stable. The most dangerous misinterpretation. Do not mistake this chapter as fear-based. Fear immobilizes. This chapter clarifies. Clarity removes fantasy. Fantasy is what causes collapse. The subtle trap of power. Accelerated manifestation gives a sense of control. Control without calibration creates arrogance. Arrogance destabilizes faster than doubt. This chapter exists to interrupt that trajectory. Why many people never reach the final chapter? Not because they stop reading, because they stop integrating. They accumulate insight, but refuse discipline. They want outcomes without transformation. This book will not serve them. The last warning in plain language. If you want speed without stability, stop here. If you want results without responsibility, stop here. If you want to remain unconscious while reality accelerates, stop here. Continuing without commitment will cost you more than ignorance ever did. The quiet invitation. If you continue, you do so knowing that acceleration is no longer a trick. It is a condition that demands coherence, a condition that removes excuses, a condition that reshapes identity permanently. Why this chapter is shorter than it feels. Because warnings do not need elaboration. They need honesty, and honesty is uncomfortable. The question that ends this chapter. Not, do you believe this? But, are you willing to live as if it is true? Because after this point, pretending otherwise will not protect you. What awaits in the final chapter? The final chapter does not offer hope. It offers integration. It explains why, once this knowledge is internalized, you cannot return to unconscious creation. And why that is not a loss. It is a crossing, and crossings only happen once. If you continue, you do so as someone who knows, and knowing changes everything. Chapter 10. You can't unknow this final integration and responsibility. There is a moment in every genuine transformation where the mind stops seeking more information and starts reorganizing reality. This is that moment, not because something new is being revealed, but because everything you already know has converged. This chapter does not open a door. It seals one. Why this is not an ending. Endings imply closure. What happens here is irreversibility. Once you understand the mechanics of speed, identity, nervous system regulation, social resistance, calibration, timing, and responsibility, you cannot return to unconscious creation. You may try, but your system will not cooperate. Ignorance was once a buffer. Now it is gone. The integration. Most people avoid. Integration is not understanding. It is embodiment. It is when knowledge alters how you move, choose, pause, and respond. After this point, you notice misalignment immediately. You feel saturation before collapse. You sense resistance before sabotage. This awareness changes your relationship with reality, not dramatically, quietly. Why responsibility feels heavy. At first, responsibility here does not mean blame. It means causality without distance. You no longer attribute outcomes to luck, fate, timing, or other people. You see the chain: internal state, regulation, behavior, consequence. This clarity can feel oppressive, not because it limits you, but because it removes excuses. The loss you will grieve. There is a subtle grief after integration. You lose the fantasy of effortless speed, the comfort of unconscious delay, the innocence of not knowing why things fall apart. This grief is real, because unconsciousness was lighter, but it was also unstable. Why power stops feeling dramatic. True power is not loud. It does not announce itself. After integration, acceleration no longer feels thrilling. It feels inevitable. You stop asking whether something will work. You ask whether you are calibrated enough to hold it. That shift changes everything. The end of magical thinking. This book does not leave you empowered in the motivational sense. It leaves you accurate. You see where speed helps. You see where it harms. You see where restraint is wisdom, not fear. This accuracy replaces hope with discernment, and discernment sustains far more than hope ever did. Why you can't share this freely. You may feel an urge to explain this book to others. Most will not hear it, not because they are incapable, but because timing cannot be forced. Explaining prematurely destabilizes both sides. This knowledge requires contextual readiness. Without it, it sounds excessive or threatening or unnecessary. The new relationship. With silence. After integration, silence becomes functional. You explain less, you announce less, you anticipate less, not because you shrink, because you stabilize. Stability reduces noise. Noise invites interference. What changes in practice? You move differently now. You pause when expansion feels dysregulating. You withdraw when coherence fragments. You advance when regulation holds. This is not caution, it is mastery, the responsibility. No one celebrates from now on. If things collapse, you will know why. Not intellectually, somatically. That knowing removes victimhood, but it also removes comfort. You will feel correction immediately, and you will be responsible for responding consciously. Why this is not burden, but precision. Responsibility narrows options, but it sharpens outcomes. You waste less energy chasing what you cannot hold. You stop longing for timelines that would destroy you. You choose integrity over intensity, and intensity becomes unnecessary. The quiet authority that emerges after this point. You stop seeking permission, not rebelliously, naturally. You trust your regulation more than external reassurance. You trust your pacing more than urgency. You trust coherence more than outcome. This trust is not belief. It is earned, the last illusion to release. You are not meant to use this knowledge to control reality. You are meant to cooperate with it consciously. Control creates tension. Coherence creates flow. Flow, when regulated, sustains speed. The final integration. You now understand why this book was hidden. Not because it was powerful, but because it demands maturity. Fast results are easy. Fast responsibility is not. This book was never about manifestation. It was about becoming someone reality can respond to immediately without damage. The truth that closes everything. You cannot unknow this. You can ignore it, but your system will not. From now on, life will respond faster, not because you activate anything, but because delay no longer protects you. Protection now comes from alignment, the final line you carry forward. You do not move fast because you want more. You move precisely because you can now hold what arrives, and that is the difference between collapse and permanence. This is not the end of learning. It is the end of pretending. And from here on, reality will treat you accordingly, silently, immediately, accurately. If you are still here, it's not because you wanted motivation. It's because you were ready for responsibility. Subscribe to Hidden Library Archives if you want access to knowledge that doesn't comfort, but prepares you for what comes next. If you reach the end, leave a comment with a single word that describes what shifted inside you, not for others, for yourself.